Let's all, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Miss Michelle Johnson.
Hello, how are y'all this afternoon? Yeah. I don't know what time it is, whether it's the morning or afternoon. I flew in last night and I had a very delayed flight, so I got in maybe 12 hours ago. And so, so I'm here today. Y'all heard my bio, so that's a little bit about me. I am a survivor. And so I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my story as well as the criminalized aspect of victims. Because a lot of times we think of human trafficking victims as that silent cry, like, okay, I'm here and I'm being held against my will and I don't want to be here, and a lot of times that's not what you see. Victims of human trafficking, they're usually coerced, all these different things. Psychological coercion is real, and a lot of times victims are often seen as promiscuous, pretty much. So when we think about children who are exposed to those situations, it's like they're no longer a child because they've been raped several times. And so we have to look at them where they're at versus you're hot, you're fast, all you want to do is have sex. And so a lot of times that's what we see in Louisiana. Law enforcement may say, oh, they're just doing that, they want attention, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, someone introduced them to that. Somebody dressed them in that provocative wear, clothing. We've had kids who would get in the car and just start taking off what they had on and put on a sweatshirt and sweatpants, and they're finally talking to us. And so I will ask, I will say that this presentation discusses references to abuse, violence, and potentially upsetting content related to victimization. So if at any time, if you feel like, oh, I need to stand up, I need to step out, please do so. I will not be offended, because if I ever get triggered in a presentation, I do that myself, and I just want everyone to have the freedom to do that. I'm also going to ask that you refrain from taking pictures or videos, because there's going to be a lot of my story photos, and so I will let you the first slide and the last slide, y'all are more than welcome to take a picture of that. There are, Lynn has his camera crew, which is totally fine, and I think some people are taking pictures at this table. And so I just ask that so that I'm not re-victimized, because I land places and people are now using my slides. And I'm like, I never gave permission for that. And so I have to put that in there. Victim-offender intersection. And that's the situation where a victim of trafficking is also accused of engaging in criminal acts related to trafficking, such as prostitution, theft, and drug crimes, and etc. It could be any crime. And I kind of want to stop right there, because, again, when we think of human trafficking, a lot of times we don't realize that the people walking the streets who are being, picked up by buyers on these tracks, which is a non-prostitution, area, we may look at them and think of them as a prostitute. Okay, we need to look at them as a potential victim, because somewhere in their life, nobody wakes up and decides, I'm going to be a prostitute. It's indoctrinated, or it's by circumstance, because you have survival sex. So that person could have been a child victim, and now that's all they know is prostitution. Key aspects of victim-offender intersectionality, there's a lot of coercion and control. And so you don't have trafficking unless there is coercion. So there's force, fraud, and coercion, which are the elements to prove human trafficking. And so traffickers force victims to engage in illegal acts as part of the trafficking operation. criminalization of victims. The criminal justice may prosecute victims for crimes committed under duress, because a lot of times trafficking victims will not show up to court and say, "Hi, I'm a trafficking victim and this is what my trafficker forced me to do." Usually when we hear that somebody has been identified as a victim and they're like, "Oh, they said they're a human trafficking victim," and I ask them, "Did they say those words?" And they're like, "No, they said, they're in prostitution, da da da." And that's usually what you'll find. It's very rare that a victim identifies themselves as a survivor or a victim of human trafficking. And so I want to share a little bit about my story, because I talked about the vulnerabilities. And so with my situation as a child, I was failed by the system over and over and over again. I was in foster care as an infant. My dad was into child pornography. He would get toddlers together and people would come in, and so it was horrific. And pretty much, I don't remember the abuse because I was a toddler, but I do remember sitting in this court at the stand, and I was identifying the difference between a pen and a pencil and an apple and an orange. And at that time, he pled no contest. He was sentenced to therapy. And I was like, wow, you're sentencing him to therapy. And then when I looked at all the records from the case, because my mom kept all the paperwork, I see where the state had to pay tens of thousands of dollars for us to go to therapy, because we were the victims. But how is it that he is now entitled to the same consequence for his actions? Because that was a consequence for me. I should have never had to go to therapy. I should have never had any of that happen. So why is he entitled to the same sentence, pretty much? And so from there, my mom, we were placed back with her, and it was kind of like you learn not to tell, because she did not want us to go back into custody, and she thought as a single mom she could protect us. And pretty much trafficking in my household, my generation, it's back. It goes back. It's generational. My grandma, she was 14, being sold on the naval bases of New Orleans. So I'm from New Orleans. And my grandfather was in the Navy, and he was her buyer. And so you have to be 18 or older to be in the Navy. So he was an adult. And he had sex with her, got her pregnant, and his mom said, "Now you marry her." And so she had 3 more children after that, and then they divorced, and then she had 4 more children and began trafficking them. And so again, it's generational. And then she trafficked one of my aunt's daughters. And so it's very much in the family. My grandfather on my dad's side, he was arrested for human trafficking. Back then it was called the Mann Act. And so he was 18, he was in a motorcycle club, and they were selling women all throughout the southern states. And so for him, it was like, he was basically a kid himself. He was introduced to meth at the age of 13. And so when you look at the circumstances of the failing of just life, pretty much. Well, thankfully the judge saw that he was young, and he was like, "I'm willing to give you a chance," because he felt like he had more life ahead of him. And my grandpa actually got out of prison, turned his life around, became a boat captain, and started doing, the boat stuff all up and down the Mississippi River. And so pretty much, so for me, what does that look like? My mom, same thing. She was married off at the age of 16. Her dad sexually abused her, and when she reported it, they told her to stop lying. The police did, and brought her back home and dropped her off. And so it's like, historically. And so for her, she was like, I just need to keep my kids by me and do the best I can. And so her boyfriends were constantly sexually abusing me, and it was almost like she had a sticker on her forehead. Single mom with abused kids, sexually abused kids. because that's who targeted her. And once they found out that, I was already sexually abused, they felt like they were empowered to do that. And so every time I reported, nothing happened. And so for me, it was like, you just stop telling whenever stuff happens. Because when you do tell, there's bigger consequences, because the perpetrator finds out even though nothing happens. And so for me, I met my first trafficker at the age of 16 because I was trying to not go back to the house that my mom was fixing to have to bring us back to, which was her boyfriend who was trying to marry me and her and have sex with both of us. And so at the time, I told her, I don't want to go back there. And so my cousin was in the life, and she, she's an independent prostitute. I don't use the word sex work because prostitution is not work. I am not here today with the intent of being raped, beat, and sold. And that's what they try to classify prostitution as work. And so for me, I knew she was engaging with men pretty much, and so she ended up having one man who worked in New Orleans East building yachts, and he was from Ecuador, so he wasn't from our country. And she told me, everything he had to offer. She basically set me up with him, which is a form of trafficking. And so she knew I was vulnerable, I had a need, and she had a daughter. I was pushing her daughter down the street. He drove past me to drop her off, and on his way out the neighborhood, he pulled over and spoke to me. I really don't remember what was said, but I do know I got in the car. He brought me to his house. He showed me his house, all his cars, and then he showed me what condoms were. And my mom thought that it would be safer for me to go with him than to go back to the boyfriend, because again, she was married off at 16 to escape the abuse happening. And so she didn't realize that he was a buyer. And so for him, he basically had me, my mom wrote notarized custody into his mom's name. Like I said, they were from Ecuador, they were here on green cards. She did not speak English, and she was the one who had all say-so over my medical, school, everything. And so pretty much nobody saw the red flags. I had to recruit friends from school to introduce them to him. I didn't even realize what I was doing. And then he would go to their families' houses and get with them. And their parents allowed it. And so it was like he knew who was vulnerable. And so fast forward, I turned 18. There's this thing called Hurricane Katrina. And I ended up going to back to Baton Rouge. That's where my mom was. And she was no longer with the boyfriend. And so I'm like, wow, okay, maybe it's safe for me to return. And if it's not safe, I'm 18, so I'm old enough to not have to remain in the home. And so I went back. She went to enroll me in school. And when the school, reviewed my records, they were like, you're 18 in the 11th grade. You'll graduate at the age of 19. Another kid deserves your seat. So I was put out of school basically because of a hurricane and the grade I was in, and they were overcrowded, and so that put me on the streets. I became vulnerable. Fast forward to when I met my first quote-unquote pimp. I thought I was helping this girl. Come to find out she was a victim, and she was trying to escape her trafficker. And the only way he was going to allow her to leave was if she brought him another victim. And so what ended up happening was she saw me, she thought I was vulnerable, and she decided that I would be the next victim. And so she told me she needed to get her stuff from this guy, and he basically, when I brought her to the Waffle House, he was like, in the car, she gets in the car, they're in the car for a while, and I'm like, this is weird, what's going on? So I get out of my car and I walk over there, and she is like, "Hey, do you want to take a ride?" Me, I've never received mental health for all my abuse, so to me, I'm like, sure, we all go back to our perpetrators at some point. And so she ended up, once I got in the car, I was in the back seat, he immediately told me he was a pimp. I said there was no such thing. That's only on TV. And he basically laughed, and, we went from there. He tried to sell me the first night, I refused. And he laughed, and he was like, "Oh, you don't have to do that." And then he realized that I was not in the life, and so he ended up having to groom me. And so he groomed me by becoming my boyfriend, because he saw the vulnerability in me. He asked me everything about my life, told him everything that happened to me. He pinned me against my family, told me they're not going to protect you. That's horrible. That should have never happened to you, while he is scheming to sell me for the rest of my life, pretty much. And so when we dated for some months, and then when he tried to sell me again, I refused, so he sold me to a gorilla pimp. The gorilla pimp then basically told me, "This is what you're going to do, and you have no choice." And so he had sent me to New Orleans on Bourbon Street. They dropped me off on a cross street and told me to go find a date. I didn't even know the terminology. When they told me we were going to the track, I thought we were going to the horse racing track in New Orleans. I'm like, why are we going there? That's how naive and green I was to everything. And so I didn't make money the first night because I had no idea what a date was and what I was supposed to do. And so I got in trouble. And he pretty much beat me and held me there for a week until I made money. And then, my Romeo pimp, as I call him, the one who became my boyfriend, he decided, "I want to be the rescuer. I can help you, but this is the only way you can escape him, is if you choose up with me." Because in trafficking, regulations that you have to follow. And pretty much, I think, Pastor, when you said that one of the girls never made eye contact with you, that is a rule. If you make eye contact and lift your head and speak, or even look at the person in their eyes, you get beat. That person either has to be buying you, or you have to be recruiting them. You cannot look them in their eyes. And so for me, it was always, I had to keep my head down. I learned how to look through the peripheral of my eyeballs so that I could see, okay, who is in front of me, what's happening. I could identify shoes, everything. And so pretty much what their scheme was, and it's a lot within, like, up here, Chicago on down to the south, Memphis, all of that, they do the get rich quick scheme, which is where they have their victims prey on pretty much tourists. And so New Orleans is known for tourists. We have all these conferences, which are men's conferences, businesses, all of that. And so the men go out there, they're away from home, they're getting drunk, and we had to learn how to identify them through their clothing to see how much money they had. So I could look at shoes, jackets, watches, rings, and know how much money they had. And so with that, we had to use, through prostitution, we had to take their debit cards and take all the money off, pretty much. And so with that, every night my quota was $10,000 with that. And so the most money I made for him was $90,000 in one night, and then I had to get up the very next day and make my quota, pretty much. And just to give y'all an idea of what my day looked like, it was pretty much, I don't even know when it started or ended, because I had to get to the track by 11 p.m. I lived away from there, an hour away. I would usually have to be out there till 6 a.m. If I didn't make any money, then I had to stop on the way back. There's a truck stop when you come over the spillway. So we would have to stop there. But before we left New Orleans, we had to go into a hotel and post our ads on Backpage for Baton Rouge. And so we would stop at the truck stop, then we would have to drive to Baton Rouge, and then we would have to wait on the calls. And then by 5 p.m. we had to go across the river to Port Allen, where we are known for, we are like the refinery alley. We have 150 plants along the Mississippi River. And so where there's plants, there's out-of-town workers away from their wives, which then becomes the buyers. So we would have to go across the river and basically proposition them in as they're getting off of work and going to their hotel. When we're done doing that, we go back to our hotel and we may get to take a nap and it starts all over again. So you're constantly deprived. So with that 90,000, I ended up getting arrested. And this is the police report, half of it. Pretty much, law enforcement asked me who gave me the card, and that's when I told them that a trick gave me the card. So we call the buyers tricks. I don't like to say it anymore as I'm a professional because it's just a horrible word. It's like, okay, they're buyers. That's the real term. And so I never told them about a pimp. They put that in there. I told him he gave me the card, and then I would go inside the store. I would take like money orders, buy the money orders, and then there was a store that just got busted in the French Quarter, Unique's Market or something, because they were doing illegal activity. And I just laughed because I was like, all these years later, y'all finally got them. And so they asked me to, and this is my wife-in-law, the Miss Gaines person, that's my wife-in-law who was trafficked with me. We always went out in pairs, and so because she was my wife-in-law, she became my co-defendant. Because we went into the stores together. I would go in, get the max that I could get, then I'd give her the card, she would go in there. We used to have money order machines in Walmart. I don't know if y'all ever had those, but in Louisiana we did. I shut them down. They had to take them out of there because there was no regulation. There was no ID check, and we were doing it in masses. And so they pretty much showed me a, lineup. And they asked me to identify my wife-in-law and my trafficker. At that time, I asked what would happen. They didn't put that in there, but I asked what would happen if I did that. And I don't remember what they told me, but my next response was, Ms. Johnson became very nervous, shaking, crying, and refused to answer any more questions. Because I was frozen. Because I didn't know what to do, and they weren't asking the right questions. They never told me I was a victim. They told me I was the criminal. And so the first photos where I was arrested for the access device fraud, the middle photo is 2 days later when they did that police report with my interview. I'm still crying in that photo. The next photo is 2 days later because I had to go to another parish. Pretty much we were whole southeast Louisiana, so I had to go to every prison that I went into their parish and went into a store. But with me in the orange, I was stone cold again because my trafficker, I called him, told him about what was happening, and he told me not to say anything. So I didn't speak to that police department. That's Ascension Parish right there. And then this is a continuation of my life. And I want to say each mugshot is a felony. It's not a misdemeanor. And where my hair is growing out, that's where I'm just being rearrested for charges that I did before I ever got arrested. And so the one in the middle where my hair is blonder, I had just got out with the white shirt. They fixed me back up and was ready to sell me again. My hair is done. I'm looking exhausted because I got picked up off the track. So if you look at that photo compared to the others where I'm already in, and then the one in the pink shirt, I'm exhausted again. And then that's when I had to plead guilty, and that was my parole shot. This one right here, I love that it's brighter than all the others. That was the day I was supposed to die.
Bless the Lord.
I was done. I was tired. My trafficker, I had been with him for years, a lot of years, from 2008 to 2011. And so that was actually, today's the 11th, that was October 19th. I went out to the track with one of my wife-in-laws and I told her, we're not going to make any money tonight, because tomorrow I'm leaving either in a body bag or on foot. And she just kind of looked at me. I have some in my pocket. I'm trying to hold it back. And so what happened was, we came back from the track that morning. It was about 6 or 7. And he told me to post my ad. And I said, I think I posted the ad. Or no, I didn't post the ad. What I did was I packed my stuff, and he was sitting at the door, and I was carrying my stuff out, and he said, where are you going? I said, I'm leaving. And I was his bottom. And so I told him I was leaving, and he said, not with those things, I own your things. And I said, you can have them. And then he told me, as I tried to walk out again, you cannot leave because I own you. And that's when I fought. And he beat me. And then it was to the point to where, you know, he had to pack up the hotel because it was a big commotion. And if you look at my face, there's no markings on my face, because he never hit our faces. Because if you hit the face, then you can't sell your product. He always hit me in my head. He threw something at me and I had a massive bruise on my arm. I didn't know if he shot me or what happened. And so for me, law enforcement, I think that's when he made me post my ad. And when I posted my ad, I didn't know, but law enforcement was looking for us. And they came, they called my ad, and then I was like, oh, I forgot to ask, are they law enforcement? So I went to call it back, and the phone was a dud. And so I knew it was law enforcement doing a sting. And so as I loaded all our stuff, he was taking a shower. And y'all are believers, so I'm gonna go ahead and say it. 6 months earlier, I was being trafficked all throughout the U.S. And I think I was in California, and I had a dream. And in the dream, it was what was just happening. The story I'm telling you. I had a dream that law enforcement came in the door with their guns drawn. And so when I saw that unmarked car pull in the driveway, I said, they're here. And I went into the room, and I left the room door open so that they could just push it open. And they came in with their guns drawn. And at first, they were like, we're not here for you, we're here for him and her. And then they learned who I was, because I had just made another $72,000. And I had a new charge, which is why that picture is there. And so again, if you look at the process, each felony charge has 5 mugshots, because that's 5 different parishes that I was having to go to jail in. Well, there came a day that, you know, while I was in jail, and this lit up one, FBI said that they were investigating us, and so they ended up coming in to talk to me. I wouldn't talk to him at first. I was very scared. There was a lot of corruption with law enforcement in my trafficker situation. And so for me, I'm sitting here like, I'm not talking to anyone. So my cousin with state police, I requested that he was there in case my body came up missing, because my trafficker had a homicide detective on his payroll. And those mugshots before that, I was crying and I was hard. That orange suit, he sent in the homicide detective to interview me and make sure I didn't talk. And so I was scared. Well, I ended up talking, I ended up sharing everything, and then I ended up testifying. And so here we're at the governor's mansion celebrating because it was the first case in Louisiana to go to trial. So my advocate is right here. I'm going from left to right. The woman in the yellow dress, Leslie, she was a prosecutor. I'm in the middle. The lady next to me is the FBI agent, and then the man on the end was the lead prosecutor. And then that is my trafficker. He was sentenced to 40 years. He appealed it. He came back. Well, he appealed it. The judge was mad and gave him 45 years. Oh, yes. Well, it was a historical sentence for her because she never sentenced anyone. She was light on crime. And so I went after her in my victim impact statement and basically told her she's the reason I'm all messed up. And so, it was crazy because I prayed, the maximum at the time was 10 years for me. I prayed that he got doubled. And somehow the law changed and he did get 20 years for my charge. And so that is combined with 3 offenses of trafficking. So with me, I have a criminal record, and so I'm sitting here like, hey, I'm a victim, but I'm being told that my record would not be expunged till the year of 2095. I was born in '87. I said, what is the point? Straight up. And so everybody wanted me to get a pardon. They kept saying, oh, the governor loves you, da-da-da-da. And so for me, I'm like, shut up, that's not what's going to happen, because what about the others that are behind me? That's the only reason I do this work. Someone the other day asked me, what's your favorite part about what you do? And I said, nothing. I said, I don't like any of this. I shouldn't have to do this. I said, but what I love the most is the impact, because God uses me every single day. So this is me testifying. So I called the senator in the middle right there, next to me. I called her in 2020 and I told her, you need to pull your bill now. She had an expungement bill for survivors, but it was only prostitution-related offenses. And I said, that's not going to work. She said, yes, ma'am. She pulled it, and it was in the final stages of passage. So we came back together, and I said, this is what we need. We need any nonviolent offenses, felony offenses. And so she pulled that into SB 148. I testified in the Senate. You're only allowed 3 minutes. They gave me, well, I took 20. And they never stopped me. And then over here, I testified in the House. Again, only 3 minutes. And I stopped myself, and they were like, and I was like, okay, I'll give y'all more. And so it was very historical. Everyone has said nobody has gotten the opportunity to testify in the length of me. And so we ended up having the passage of that bill. So it's Act 130, known as the Michelle Johnson Act. Pretty much it's certification through the DA, so the district attorney does a certification, which is basically your story lined out with the offenses and how it coincides with your trafficking. The eligibility is, again, misdemeanors and nonviolent felony offenses. And then the process, the survivor files expungement with the certification. The state or law enforcement can object and request a hearing. But if no one objects within 60 days, the survivor can file to waive the hearing, which means it's an automatic expungement. And then the filing fees are waived for human trafficking survivors. And then the effect, an expungement removes the record from public access through law enforcement, though law enforcement can still see it during criminal investigations. So that is always. But like any expungement process, law enforcement can always see it because that's how they know what you've done in the past. But anybody who looks it up, it's totally, and y'all could take a picture of that. And so for me, I was like, again, I'm like, this is for the others, you know. And so I was the first to use it. And this is me and my attorneys through STAR, which is Sexual Trauma Awareness Response. They are the leading sexual assault center in Louisiana, and they also incorporate human trafficking victims. So they went with me. Oh, the little one on the left, she's the CEO, and she was just like, Michelle, this is so hard. And I said, I'm so sorry, we're doing it for the others. Because she wanted to be the one to lead the expungement, because they are the ones who had to notify me that it wouldn't happen. And so I went back and I said, I want y'all to be a part. And she is the one who asked the Senate to name the bill after me. And so pretty much, as of right now, I'm no longer a convicted felon. That was actually taken a few months ago. Yes, and so it's true freedom. You know, I can do whatever I want. You know, I can do whatever I want, pretty much, because when I started school for criminal justice administration to get my bachelor's degree, they basically told me, nobody's going to hire you because of your record. And I said, it don't matter, just give me the thing. I'm already hired. And they're like, huh? So they made me sign an affidavit that I would not sue them. And they have been mind blown every time I tell them the things I do. They're just like, what? And I'm like, I don't even need y'all's degree. I just need a paper. Just encourage y'all to find your lane and stay in it. You know, don't cross over, find your niche, find out what you're good at, and stay in that. Whether it's you're doing housing, you know, that's a calling, and it's a price. And so if you can't do housing, don't try to do it. You know, find your niche. If you're the person going and adopting a room, you know, you're being a part. And so I encourage you to just find out what the need is. You know, y'all have Lynn here, ask them, like, hey, what's the need? Oh, you're doing an event, how can we help? How can we serve the people? You know, don't ever feel like you're the rescuer, because you cannot go out there and pull women out if you think you are. Because, like I said, Pastor said that that girl wouldn't even look at him because she was scared and she was out. But up here, she was still in bondage. And so I just want to thank you all and have y'all enjoy the rest of your day.